You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Moser. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, the 16th of April. Illegal immigrant jailed for rape. Muslim Labour peer denies offer of a 10 million bounty on Obama and Bush. Muslim girl leaves baby girl to die. 5 Eurozone countries downgraded last night. £500 to be paid by each household to help Greek debt. Security forces claim victory over Taliban in Kabul. Thought for the day, Africa, and do we need more of that culture in the UK? UK news. An illegal immigrant has been jailed for 14 years for raping a British woman. Sang Trang, aged 26, who is homeless, attacked the woman with a machete and threatened to chop her up if she didn't comply. The rape was filmed by him, clearly a man of taste who can multitask. Tran had already admitted to 2 other charges of rape. The attack has caused outrage amongst the community of Birmingham. One British National Party spokesperson stated, "Nationalists should patrol our borders, airports and checkpoints for these illegal immigrants because our governments simply do not care who or what comes into this country." A Muslim Lord of the Realm and Labour Party peer has been suspended after he allegedly offered £10 million for the capture of the President of the United States, Barack Obama, along with George W. Bush. Our old friend Lord Ahmed vigorously denies the comments made in Pakistan. He is quoted as saying, "If the US can offer a $10 million reward for Hafiz Mohammed Saeed, then I can announce a bounty on Barack Obama and George W. Bush." Of course, the old joke of what goes on in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas clearly does not apply to Pakistan. Hafiz Mohammed Saeed was the main suspect behind the Mumbai bombing which killed 166 innocent people at a train station 6 years ago. A Muslim woman who had a child out of wedlock allowed her baby to die to stop bringing shame on her family. The woman, named as Fatima Ali, appeared in Bolton Crown Court this week and was given a suspended sentence. She gave birth in her bedroom and left the baby girl to die. She had been seeing another Muslim man who gave her money for an abortion in 2009, but she did not go through with it. Ali, who lives with her uncle and aunt, realised how foolish she had been getting involved with a man who had promised to marry and support her, but instead left the country. Her phone revealed numerous texts between Ali and her partner, who had already left the country, one of which included a photograph of the baby girl. The court also heard how Fatima's entire family had since been ostracised by community members, not only for what she had done, but also because of the relationship she had out of wedlock. Euro news. 5 Eurozone countries had their credit ratings downgraded last night as the single currency debt crisis deepened. Italy and Spain were amongst the nations to be hit by ratings agency Fitch in a bitter blow for their economies. Belgium, Slovenia and Cyprus's credit ratings were also cut, but France escaped the humiliation of being stripped of its coveted AAA score for a second time. British households each face a £500 bill to bail out Greece and save the crisis-hit euro. Britain will be expected to hand over an extra £1 billion for the International Monetary Fund's £110 billion rescue package. It takes the total figure spent by the UK in helping prop up the Eurozone to £12.5 billion, around £500 for each home. MPs and European MPs said they were outraged at the sum, with Tory backbencher Peter Bone saying, "We should not be using money from hard-working British taxpayers to bail out a currency that we have nothing to do with. This is an abuse of the IMF system. It is sending good money after bad. There should not be a penny of British money involved. There is no chance that Greece is going to recover within the euro." World news. Peacekeeping monitors have arrived in Syria. 24 unarmed monitors arrived in the capital Damascus to try and find out the cause of the failure of the ceasefire. Another 24 monitors are to arrive in Damascus in the following days. The ceasefire has lasted for up to 4 days. Anti-government rebels have announced that government forces have been shelling Homs, breaking the ceasefire. Government forces claim that it is the other side breaking the ceasefire and they are just retaliating. Afghan security forces are claiming their biggest victory over the Taliban. In a recent large attack by the Muslim extremists on Kabul yesterday, all of the Taliban fighters have apparently been killed. Thought for the day: Africa. And do we need more of that culture in the UK? I'm going to read a script that was sent to me by a fellow nationalist. The man who wrote this I will not name. He has spent 43 years in Africa and knows what he's talking about. Also remember that now the number of African immigrants to this country is ever increasing. Do we really want this subculture in the UK to grow? As you can see by this article, you can take the boy out of the country, but can you take the country out of the boy? Do we need to wake up over here? Why Africa has gone to hell. White Zimbabweans used to tell a joke. What is the difference between a tourist and a racist? The answer? About a week. Few seem to joke any more. Indeed, the last time anyone laughed out there was over the memorable headline "Banana Charged with Sodomy," relating to the Reverend Canaan Banana and his alleged proclivities. Zimbabwe was just the latest African state to squander its potential, to swap civil society for civil strife and pile high its corpses. Then the wrecking virus moves on and a fresh spasm of violence erupts elsewhere. Congo, Ivory Coast, Sudan, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, even Kenya. Take your pick, for it is the essence of Africa, the recurring A to Z of horror. Therefore, as surely as Nelson Mandela took those steps from captivity to freedom, his own country will doubtless shuffle into chaos and ruin. Mark my words, one day it'll be the turn of South Africa to revert to type. Its farms that lie wasted and its towns that are battle zones, its dreams and its expectations that lie rotting on the veldt. That is the way of things. Africa rarely surprises. It simply continues to appall. When interviewed on BBC Radio, the legendary South African jazz musician Hugh Masekela spoke of the 350-year struggle for freedom by blacks in South Africa. The man might play his trumpet like a dream, but he talks arrant nonsense. What he has brought into is a false narrative that rewrites history and plays upon post-colonial liberal angst. The construct is as follows: white, inglorious and bad; black, noble and good; empire, bad; independence, good; the West, bad; the African, good. Forgotten in all this is that while Europeans were settling and spreading from the Cape, the psychopathic Shaka Zulu was employing his impi to crush everyone, including the Xhosa in his path. And the Xhosa were busy themselves slaughtering Bushmen and Hottentots. Yet it is the whites who take the rap, for it is they who won the skirmishes along the Fish and Blood rivers and who eventually gained the prize. What suffers is the truth and, of course, Africa. We are so cowed by the moist-eyed mantras of the left and the oath-laden platitudes of Bono and Geldorf. We are forced to accept collective responsibility for the bloody mess that is now Africa. It paralyses us while excusing the black continent and its rulers. Whenever I hear people agitate for the freezing of third world debt, I want to shout aloud for the freezing of those myriad overseas bank accounts held by black African leaders. President Mobutu of Zaire alone is believed to have squirreled away well over $10 billion. Whenever apartheid is held up as a blueprint for evil, I want to mention Bokassa snacking on human remains, Amin clogging a hydroelectric dam with floating corpses, the president of Equatorial Guinea crucifying his victims along the roadway from his airport. Whenever slavery is dredged up, I want to remind everyone the Arabs were there before us. The native Ashanti and others were no slouches at the game, and it remains extinct in places like the Ivory Coast. I hear the AIDS pandemic somehow blamed on Western indifference. I want to point out to the African native practice of dry sex, the hobby-like prevalence of rape, and the clumps of despotic black leaders who deny a link between the disease and HIV and who block the provision of antiretrovirals. And whenever Africans bleat of imperialism and colonialism, I want a campaign for the demolition of every road, college and hospital we ever built to let them start again. It is time they governed themselves. Yet few play the victim card quite so expertly as black Africans. Few are quite so gullible as the white liberal left. On the eve of this millennium, Nelson Mandela and friends lit candles mapping the shape of their continent and declared the 21st century would belong to Africa. It is a pity that for every Mandela there are over 100 Robert Mugabes. So Britain had an empire and Britain did slavery. Boo-hoo, deal with it, move on. Slavery ended here over 200 years ago. More recently there were tens of millions of innocents enslaved or killed in Europe by the twin industrialised evils of Nazism and Stalinism. My own first cousins, twin brothers aged 16, died down a Soviet salt mine. I need no lecture on shackles and neck-irons. Most of us are descendants of both oppressors and oppressed. Most of us get over it. Mind you, I am tempted by thoughts of compensation from Scandinavia for the wickedness of its Viking raids and its slaving hub on the Liffey. As for the 1066 invasion of England by William the Bastard. The white man's burden is guilt over Africa. The black man's is sentimentality. And we are blind for it. We have tipped hundreds of billions of aid dollars into Africa without first ensuring proper governance. We encourage NGOs and food parcels and have built a culture of dependency. We shy away from making criticism, tiptoe around the crassness of the African Union and flinch at every anti-Western jibe. The result is a free-for-all for every syphilitic black despot and his coterie of family functionaries. Africa casts a long and toxic shadow across our consciousness. It is patronised and allowed to underperform. So too is its distant black diaspora. A black London pupil is excluded from his school, not because he is lazy, stupid or disruptive, but because that school is apparently racist. A black youth is pulled over by the police, not because black males commit over 80% of street crime, but because the authorities are somehow corrupted by prejudice. Thus the tale continues. Excuse is everywhere and a sense of responsibility nowhere. You will rarely find either a black national leader in Africa or a black community leader in the West prepared to put up his hands and say, it is our problem, our fault. Those who look to Africa for their roots, role models and inspiration are worshipping false gods. And like all false gods, the feet are of clay, the snouts long and designed for the trough, and the torture cells generally very well equipped. I once met the son of a Liberian government minister and asked if he had seen video footage of his former president Samuel Doe being tortured to death. Of course, he replied with a smile. Everyone has. They cut off the ears of Doe and force-fed them to him. His successor, the warlord Charles Taylor, was elected in a landslide result using the campaign slogan, "He killed my ma, he killed my pa, but I will vote for him." Nice people. Liberia was founded and colonised by black Americans to demonstrate what slave stock could achieve. They certainly showed us. Forget my heretical belief that had a black instead of a white tribe earlier come to dominate South Africa, its opponents would not have been banished to Robben Island. They would have been butchered and buried there. When asked about the problem of Africa, Harold Macmillan suggested building a high wall around the continent and every century or so removing a brick to check on progress. I suspect that over the entire millennia that view would prove bleak and unvarying. Visiting a state in West Africa a few years ago, I wandered onto a beach and marvelled at the golden sands and at the sunlight catching on the Atlantic surf. It allowed me to forget for a moment the local news that day of soldiers seizing a schoolboy and pitching him headfirst into an operating cement machine. Almost forget. Then I spotted a group of villagers beating a stray dog to death for their sport. A metaphor of sorts for all that is wrong, another link in a word association chain that goes on something like famine, drought, overpopulation, deforestation, conflict, barbarism, cruelty, machetes, child soldiers, massacres, diamonds, warlords, tyranny, corruption, despair, disease, AIDS, Africa. Africa remains the heart of darkness. Africa is hell. And finally, a cat that has been missing from its Leicester home for 9 weeks has sparked a new idea by its owner. The owner of the cat checked the internet and has hired a sleuth to find his missing pet. The only problem is that the sleuth, an ex-police officer, lives thousands of miles away in the United States. The sleuth has been in touch with the cat owner on a regular basis and they are confident that the missing cat will soon return home. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar and I wish you all a very good night.